He stood still, the imprint of a hand blooming red across his cheek, but not a single tear fell. At Gate 41, surrounded by silent strangers, 12-year-old Elliot Grayson clutched the silver badge on his chest, a badge dismissed as fake by the flight attendant who had just slapped him. "First class is for real people," she sneered. No one stepped in. No one asked his name. But in 60 seconds, 9 airports would grind to a halt. And the woman who struck him, she'd learned the hard way that some uniforms aren't costumes, and some kids don't need to shout to bring a system to its knees. The gate buzzed with quiet announcements and soft rolling wheels, a usual hum of travel until it cracked under a single sharp slap. The sound snapped across Gate 41 like a gunshot. Freezing time. Elliot Grayson, 12 years old, stood stock still. His pressed navy blazer bore the weight of more than fabric. His chest displayed the silver Justice Override badge, glinting under harsh fluorescent lights. A fresh red mark bloomed across his cheek, and behind the sting, silence swelled. "You don't belong here," hissed Tina Morell, the flight attendant in a pristine uniform that no longer masked the venom in her voice. Her hand trembled slightly, either from the adrenaline of control or the fear that followed after. Passengers behind them stood frozen, eyes darted, mouths opened but stayed silent. Elliot didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He simply reached down to pick up his boarding pass, which had fluttered to the floor beside his worn duffel bag. The badge on his chest gleamed. Tina looked down at him with disdain, her voice rising again, this time for everyone to hear. "This section is for first-class passengers only. Move or I'll call security." Elliot's lips parted slightly. "I have a seat in 1A. His voice was low, clear, controlled. A scoff escaped Tina. "1A? That's not a seat for—" She didn't finish the sentence. Maybe she realized how many phones were already out. Or maybe, deep down, she knew she'd crossed a line but didn't know how to walk it back. Still, she pressed on. "You're playing dress-up, and this, whatever it is," she gestured harshly at his badge, "isn't going to fool anyone." The people around them shifted uncomfortably, eyes bouncing between the boy and the woman. Nobody moved to intervene. Nobody asked what the badge meant. Nobody wondered why a 12-year-old in a formal uniform stood alone in a line reserved for the elite. The silence swallowed them whole. Then Elliot turned slightly to the side, revealing the embroidery on his shoulder. Unit Grayson, in crisp, white thread. Below it, a black ribbon sewn diagonally across the seal of the Department of Homeland Security. It wasn't a toy, it wasn't for show. And still, Tina leaned in and whispered, "I don't care whose nephew you are. Rules are rules." The slap had already spoken louder than anything else. Elliot didn't cry. He didn't shout. But something in his stillness shifted. The weight of legacy, of silence, of grief, carved into steel, was already moving beneath his calm surface. Just out of frame, a woman in cleaning uniform paused mid-step, eyes locked on Elliot's badge. Something had been set in motion. Elliot stepped aside, not because he was told, but because he calculated the silence. He took a slow seat against the wall near Gate 41, resting his small duffel beside him. Around him, whispers fanned out like ripples on a still pond. Some passengers resumed pretending they hadn't witnessed anything. Others stared, phones still up, recording, but not helping. The red mark on his face had already begun to dull, but the badge on his chest shimmered under the terminal lights. Oval-shaped, silver, and far too sleek to be a toy, it bore no logo, just a single engraved phrase: "Override Protocol Access, Level 4. No one knew what that meant. Elliot glanced at the clock above the gate. Still 20 minutes before boarding. He breathed in, deep and slow, as if following a rhythm no one else could hear. Then he pressed his thumb to the back of the badge. A small sensor blinked blue once, and nothing happened. No alarms, no flickering lights, no airport shutdown. The badge went still. A few nearby passengers exchanged puzzled looks. One woman in sunglasses murmured, "Guess it's just a prop." Another laughed quietly. "He's probably some senator's kid playing hero." The tension began to deflate, replaced by a creeping wave of skepticism. Tina Morell, standing behind the counter now, shot a triumphant glance in Elliot's direction. Her smirk returned. But Elliot didn't react. He simply pulled his hand back and adjusted the cuff of his jacket. Not out of nervousness, but out of habit. The same habit drilled into him by the man whose name was stitched onto the inside lining. Agent R. Grayson, FBI. His uncle had worn that jacket. His uncle had died wearing it. Still, Elliot said nothing. Not to Tina, not to the bystanders, not even to the two security officers who glanced toward the gate but chose not to intervene. Instead, he opened the side pocket of his duffel, pulled out a matte black tablet, and tapped in a code. The screen stayed dark for 3 full seconds before revealing a series of encrypted icons, none of which resembled commercial software. A delay. Protocol wasn't failing. It was waiting. 3 more minutes ticked by. Nothing on the surface changed, but inside Elliot's badge, a silent handshake request had just been sent to a classified federal node. A handoff had begun, waiting for cross-confirmation from a secondary identity beacon. Elliot knew this. Everyone else saw nothing. To the public, the badge had fizzled. To Elliot, it had whispered, "We're listening." The quiet at Gate 41 didn't last. Whispers replaced stillness, soft and sharp like paper cuts. Passengers leaned toward one another, glancing sideways at the boy against the wall. Elliot remained motionless, eyes on his tablet screen, but his ears caught every word. "Just trying to go viral. His parents probably put him up to it. Must be some kind of performance art." A man in business casual snorted. "If that badge did anything, it would have lit up this whole terminal by now." From behind the counter, Tina Morell watched the momentum shift back in her favor. She rested her arms on the podium, smiled thinly, and called out, just loud enough to be heard but soft enough to seem friendly. "Even your little badge doesn't work, sweetheart. Guess you'll need a new magic trick." Laughter rippled lightly from a few nearby travelers. The damage was working. Doubt spreads faster than outrage. But not everyone was convinced. 3 rows back, near a column with power outlets, a man in a gray hoodie adjusted his camera angle discreetly. He hadn't spoken, hadn't moved since the slap. But now, his fingers flew across his phone. Underneath the bench, a slim rig was already recording, catching the terminal's ambient conversations, Tina's remarks, and Elliot's every quiet move. His name was Nolan Reyes, and while no one recognized him, 2 million people followed his account at Justice Unfiltered, a social journalist known for real-time ethics breakdowns. He never announced himself, he never asked permission, he just recorded. And what he captured next changed everything. Tina turned to a fellow staffer and whispered, "He'll break before boarding. They always do. Give him 10 minutes without attention and they crumble." Click. Nolan caught the sentence. Then, in a single motion, he uploaded a 37-second clip. The slap, the badge press, the blue blink, and Tina's smirk. Caption: "Slapped at Gate 41. You don't belong here," she said. "Who is this kid?" By the time Tina turned back toward the gate, the post had reached 12,000 views. Elliot, still seated, glanced up once, not at her, but at the screen above the gate. It still read, "Flight 2281, on time." No one noticed the tiny flicker behind the text, a code change so small it would have escaped untrained eyes. But Elliot saw it. Just 3 letters, JOP, Justice Override Pending. He exhaled softly. The whispers continued, but the algorithm had already begun to hum. 12 minutes passed. Not 10, not 15, exactly 12. That's how long it took for the sensor beneath Elliot's badge to glow red. Not bright or flashy, just a soft, steady pulse. 1 blink every 3 seconds. No alarms, no announcements. But if you were watching closely, you'd know something had changed. Elliot noticed it immediately. He shifted his thumb across the back of the badge, and this time, the interface on his tablet adjusted. A small icon appeared in the corner. Job AUT. Delay triggered. Awaiting clearance. He exhaled through his nose. This was the part no one ever talked about. The built-in delay protocol. A safeguard. The system wasn't meant to react instantly. Not because it couldn't, but because it needed to confirm that dignity had truly been denied. There were mechanisms, checks, human error was accounted for. But intent? That's what the delay was watching for. At Gate 41, things looked the same on the surface. Tina was now busy with a minor check-in issue. Her tone had returned to that of a polished professional. For the crowd, the drama had passed. For her, the moment was already behind. But down in Terminal 3, across the airport, in a small operations room reserved for federal liaisons, a different screen lit up. A display that hadn't been used in nearly 7 months. The words that appeared were simple. Justice Override Protocol. Layer 1 ping received. Initiating behavior audit buffer. Cross-referencing DHS sibling class authorization. Grayson 12B. A technician blinked at the screen. "Is this real?" he muttered. The man next to him didn't answer. He just picked up a phone and dialed the internal FAA extension. Meanwhile, Elliot sat still, watching the small red light blink on his chest. No one else noticed, except one. The janitorial worker from earlier, the woman who had paused, stared at the badge, and then kept moving, reappeared quietly near the back of the gate. She stood against the wall, arms folded, phone in hand. She didn't record. She didn't speak. But her eyes were fixed on Elliot, and when the red light blinked, she nodded once. Across the tarmac, in a cabin already prepped for boarding, one of the flight display tablets glitched. It flashed for a fraction of a second. Override protocol engaged, awaiting command clearance, before resetting to the usual flight map. No one inside the cockpit noticed. Yet. Back at the gate, Tina glanced toward Elliot and caught the faint red glow. Her smirk faltered. "What now?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Something was beginning, but unlike before, this time, she felt it. Elliot waited until the blinking light on his badge synchronized with the icon on his tablet. 4 blinks, 3-second pause. Repeat. That was the signal. Protocol delay had shifted into standby clearance. Now, the next move wasn't automated. It was his. He didn't hesitate. From the side pocket of his duffel, he pulled a small flip phone. Not the tablet, not a modern smartphone, but a secured, analog-coded device rarely seen outside military zones. It wasn't traceable through civilian towers. It didn't carry apps, just a keypad and one purpose. He dialed, 3 tones, then a silence. "Code G17BL Sigma," he said quietly, and he hung up. No names, no explanations, no pleasantries, just one code, one call. Across the terminal, the woman in the janitor uniform received a short vibration on her watch. She didn't react immediately, just finished wiping the last surface of a row of chairs, slid her gloves off and tossed them into the cleaning bin. Then, calmly, she walked down the gate corridor, past the newsstand, past the coffee kiosk, and turned into an employees-only hallway. No one stopped her. A minute later, she entered a small maintenance closet, locked the door behind her, and opened the false wall panel near the mop sink. Behind it, a secure terminal glowed faintly. She typed in a login. The screen recognized her retina scan instantly. AUT 8th granted. Agent Rivera, status, covert oversight, OP Houston Grayson class. Her fingers moved fast. On the opposite end of the airport, 2 gates suddenly displayed error codes on the internal network. Manual override engaged. Routing systems offline. It wasn't enough to cause panic. But the affected systems began to cascade. Delays initiated. Internal monitoring teams flagged the anomalies, but no one knew yet where the signals originated. Back at Gate 41, Elliot slid the flip phone back into his bag, his expression calm. He hadn't looked toward the janitor once. Didn't need to. Because he knew who she was. Agent Rivera had been assigned to shadow watch Elliot since the Justice Override badge had been issued 6 months prior. One of only 5 operatives cleared for juvenile DHS tier oversight. And now, her role had shifted. Not shadow, execution. Tina glanced up from her monitor. She squinted toward Elliot, noticing something had changed. His posture? His stillness? Or was it simply the way people nearby had begun checking their phones as flight updates subtly changed across multiple gates? She couldn't tell, but something in her gut twisted. Elliot hadn't yelled. He hadn't protested. He'd simply made a call. And without raising his voice, the walls around her were beginning to move. A ripple swept through the system, quiet but unmistakable. In 5 major airports, federal control towers received identical status updates, not from airline carriers, but through DHS-embedded routing codes. Flights marked as priority clearance were suddenly downgraded. Departure queues froze. Military liaison checkpoints at terminals in Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, and Seattle each displayed a banner in red. Priority launch delay. Layer 2, protocol initiated. No sirens, no media bulletins, just hesitation. Inside Houston's Terminal C, at Gate 41, none of the passengers yet knew why departure boards were shifting from on time to delayed gate hold. But a few began to notice. Phones buzzed, screens refreshed. Elliot Grayson remained seated, his badge now blinking a slow, steady red. Tina Morrell tapped on her terminal, frowning. The system wouldn't let her check in the final 2 rows. Error code 38 override conflict. She looked to the assistant manager, who shrugged. We're locked out of manifest controls. Since when? She hissed. Since now. Then a man approached. He wore a plain blazer, security lanyard, and an earpiece. His badge identified him as Airport Security Oversight, but something about his walk was wrong. Too stiff, too fast. He stopped in front of Elliot, leaning down slightly. Who authorized you to wear that uniform? He asked, voice low, almost accusatory. Elliot looked up, expression unreadable. The man's tone hardened. You think grief gives you a free pass to pretend you're someone important? You're a kid in costume. That's not just disrespectful. It's unlawful. Before Elliot could respond, there was a sudden flurry of clicks and light. A group of reporters, just arriving through an adjacent gate, spotted the tension and moved in like moths to flame. Cameras lifted. Shutters snapped. Someone whispered, "That's the kid from Gate 41. Then it happened. 2 individuals in plain clothes, their jackets marked only by a discreet federal insignia near the cuffs, emerged from opposite ends of the concourse. They approached the man in the blazer wordlessly, flashed credentials, and each took an arm. "What the hell?" he started. "Unauthorized impersonation of federal authority," one said curtly. "You're not on our list." They escorted him away as reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs burst across the gate. The media didn't know what they were witnessing, but they knew a story when they smelled one. In the chaos, Elliot didn't move, didn't react. But Agent Rivera, still watching from the back, tapped her comm device once. Back in the secure operations room, a screen blinked. Layer 2 protocol confirmed. Public eyes active. Initiating buffer cascade. All it had taken was a uniform, a question, and one false step. Now, the system was watching. The footage of Gate 41 exploded across social media like a spark in dry brush. By the time the unauthorized agent was led away, the clip had already been reposted over 100,000 times. What began as a 37-second video titled "Flight Attendant Slaps Boy in Uniform" was now appearing under a different headline. Nephew of fallen federal agent humiliated at home terminal. Someone had found his last name, and with it, everything changed. Grayson wasn't just a name. It was a flag in federal circles. Within minutes, internet sleuths traced it to Special Agent Richard Grayson, FBI, killed in the line of duty during a high-risk intercept in Virginia just 8 months prior. His death had made national headlines. A week of lowered flags, a folded flag at the funeral. Now, his nephew was the boy sitting alone, red-cheeked, badge flashing faintly at Gate 41. The internet didn't need more context. Screenshots flooded Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag Grayson nephew, #justice at Gate 41, #honor the badge. Sympathy surged, followed by outrage. The comment sections burned with fury. Unforgivable. Kids like him should be escorted, not insulted. She slapped a name this country buried with honors. But it wasn't just emotion that escalated the moment. It was a man named Shane Beckett. A field correspondent for Airway Ethics Review, Beckett had seen the viral clip and recognized the badge. He'd written about the Justice Override program months ago when it was first piloted. He knew how few were chosen, how strict the standards were. He dug deeper. In an old trade publication, buried behind an access wall, he found a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Elliot Grayson, at 10 years old, in a training facility simulation room, facing down a panel of TSA ethics officers. Underneath, a caption, "Youngest candidate to complete civilian protocol ethics training, Phase 2. It was real. Beckett screenshotted it, added his own caption. He was trained for this. This was never a tantrum. The post detonated online. More journalists joined in. A timeline formed. Elliot had completed federal ethics protocol evaluation at age 11. He had been authorized for Level 4 override not as a symbolic gesture, but because he had earned it through simulations tougher than what most adults ever face. Gate 41 was no longer just a gate. It was the ignition point. Inside the terminal, Tina Morrell refreshed her phone and froze. Her smirk drained as the headline loaded. Who slaps a federal ethics-cleared minor wearing his uncle's badge? She backed away from the counter, pulse climbing. And Elliot? He sat quietly, because silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. By noon, Tina Morrell's name was trending, nationwide. Not for tenure, not for professionalism, but for the freeze frame that had circled the globe. Her hand midair, Elliot's cheek turned, eyes steady. Every major outlet had seized it. First-class fury. Badge and blame. Gate 41 shame. Variations of the same headline pulsed across television tickers and phone screens alike. In response, Falcon Wings Airlines moved swiftly, but not wisely. Their official statement landed at 12:47 p.m. The incident at Gate 41 is under internal review. The staff member involved has been placed on temporary leave. We respect all passengers and remain committed to inclusion and dignity. But it wasn't an apology. It was a dodge. And the internet knew it. Thousands of replies flooded the post in under 10 minutes. Screenshots of the slap. Comments from military families. Video of Tina's post-slap smirk. It spiraled. Then came the real twist. An anonymous file leaked to Airway Oversight Watch, a non-profit watchdog group. Within it, an internal memo from Falcon Wings executive meeting dated 11 months ago. Subject line: Proposal to reduce annual ethics compliance budget. Projected savings, 2.4 M. The memo bore the digital signature of CEO Harrison Vale, the same man who, just last week, had posted a LinkedIn article titled, "Why Compassion Matters in the Skies." The hypocrisy was nuclear. Worse, buried in the memo's second page was a direct line. Justice Override Program training for non-federal personnel deemed excessive and optional for FY24. It wasn't just a budget cut. It was a decision to ignore the very system Elliot had been certified in. The leak exploded online. Whistleblower accounts speculated the file came from inside Falcon's ethics division. Disillusioned staff who had pushed for better standards and were overruled. Journalists circled like hawks. Why was this boy better trained in federal ethics than the adults supposed to protect him? Why did Falcon Wings cut the exact training that could have prevented Gate 41? Who decided dignity was too expensive? CEO Vale remained silent. Inside the terminal, Tina sat in the back of an HR office, scrolling through the headlines with trembling fingers. Her access badge had already been deactivated. She wasn't fired. Yet. But the suspension email had come without signature or contact. She stared at the sentence over and over. Pending external review by FAA Ethics Compliance. Outside the glass wall, Elliot remained seated near Gate 41. He hadn't moved in over an hour, but the system around him had. Not through screaming, not through outrage, through fact. And fact, when exposed to sunlight, burns deeper than fire. Within 24 hours, Gate 41 wasn't just a location, it was a symbol. News vans parked along the edges of Houston International. Satellite feeds linked coast to coast. Every major network shifted coverage from overseas politics to what was now dubbed the override crisis. Congressional staffers began drafting emergency memos before breakfast. By midday, the Oval Office was briefed. Then came the emergency press conference. Standing before a backdrop of federal and transportation seals, U.S. Secretary of Transportation Melinda Hartley addressed the nation. Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice didn't waver. "This is not about a slap," she began. "It's about who was slapped and what that tells us about the systems we trust." She paused. When a 12-year-old with federal ethics clearance, wearing a memorial uniform, is publicly humiliated by someone paid to ensure safe passage, we don't have a passenger behavior problem. We have a leadership one. The room went silent. Cameras rolled, and behind closed doors, tempers flared. In a flurry of leaked emails, a name surfaced repeatedly. Clay Thorne, Senior Policy Advisor to the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Standards. Thorne had long been known in bureaucratic circles for killing progressive regulation quietly. No filibusters, no debates. Just quiet red lines and return for revision stamps. 3 years earlier, he'd personally blocked a bipartisan proposal to expand dignity protection protocols to minors, especially those tied to federal service or bereavement. His reasoning, quoted in a 2021 internal draft memo: expanding ethical protections to children introduces unnecessary legal complexity. Air travel policies should be streamlined, not sentimentalized. The leak went viral. The same man who had dismissed honor protections as sentimental was now caught at the heart of a scandal involving the denial of honor itself. Advocacy groups pounced. A Change.org petition demanding Thorne's resignation hit 500,000 signatures in 6 hours. Thorne issued a statement through a spokesperson. "These allegations are politically motivated and misrepresent long-standing policy positions." It didn't help. A clip surfaced of Elliot's silent stare after the slap, overlaid with Thorne's quote from 2021. The internet didn't need commentary. It had context. Back at Gate 41, reporters were now stationed permanently. Camera crews rotated shifts. Federal agents subtly positioned plainclothes personnel across the terminal. Inside the control room, the Justice Override server displayed a new message. Layer 3 protocol threshold approaching. Media integration confirmed. Elliot sat in the same spot. He hadn't spoken publicly. He hadn't moved. And yet, his silence had summoned an army. Because in America, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about who watched. And now, everyone was. Camera lights followed Elliot's every movement, but he gave them nothing. No statements, no interviews. Not even a glance toward the microphone shoved near his face when he was quietly escorted from Gate 41 to a private holding room for security. He didn't flinch, he didn't cry, and he didn't speak. Instead, he waited. By the time his new flight boarded hours later, on a different airline, under federal escort, he remained silent, seated in 1A, with the Justice Override badge dimmed against his chest. But others were no longer silent. A passenger seated near Elliot during the delayed reboarding, a retired flight instructor named Luann Bridges, posted a letter on her blog the next morning. She titled it simply, "The boy didn't fight back. He didn't need to." Her words struck deep. This child wasn't trying to punish anyone. He was reminding us, those of us who wear lanyards and wings and patches, why we entered this profession in the first place. We swore to protect dignity, not just luggage, and we forgot. It went viral, but the real wave came later that afternoon. At first, it was a single post on a small grief support forum, then 3 more on parenting blogs, then Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. Children, some now teenagers, shared eerily similar experiences. All of them had worn military remembrance uniforms or ceremonial pins to honor fallen family. All of them had been dismissed, redirected, or outright removed from first class or military boarding lines. Then came the post that broke everything open. A girl named Maddie, age 9, uploaded a video with her mother's help. She sat in her Sunday dress, holding a folded flag and blinking through thick glasses. "3 weeks ago," she said, "an airline lady told me to leave the fancy seats because playing soldier was disrespectful. I was wearing my grandpa's uniform. He died in Afghanistan. I didn't say anything back. I just cried." The caption read, "I thought it was my fault until I saw Elliot." Not just. Elliot began trending within the hour. The floodgates opened. Emails poured into airline customer service lines. Union reps for cabin crews demanded mandatory ethics retraining. Veterans groups posted joint statements. Military families mobilized en masse, flooding the Department of Transportation with testimonies and demands. In Washington, the Transportation Secretary reread Luann's letter aloud during a late-night debrief. "No," she said softly, "this boy didn't fight back, but somehow he armed a nation." Outside the terminal, reporters still waited for Elliot to speak. But Elliot wasn't chasing justice. He had already delivered it, quietly, surgically. He hadn't delayed his flight. He'd delayed an entire system's ability to ignore its failures, and the runway for silence was running out. 3 weeks after Gate 41, the House chamber fell into silence as the final vote tally appeared on the screen. Justice Passenger Act. Passed. 412 to 11. A ripple moved through the gallery, not with cheers, but with stillness. The kind of stillness reserved for moments that rewrite how systems breathe. The kind of stillness Elliot Grayson had mastered without ever saying a word. The Justice Passenger Act was concise, just 9 pages, but its implications were seismic. Effective immediately, the Justice Override Badge was recognized as a federally protected designation. Any airline, agency, or employee that interfered with or disrespected a verified holder of the badge would face immediate federal ethics review and civil penalty assessment. No more optional training, no more internal slaps on the wrist. Dignity was now law. The bill included a clause few saw coming. Any past incident involving misconduct toward badge holders could be retroactively reviewed for violations of civil rights protections, especially concerning minors. Which brought them to Tina Morell. She hadn't spoken to press. Her lawyer had released a vague statement 2 weeks earlier calling the slap a regrettable overreaction, but no apology ever came. Now, she received a letter bearing the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice. The opening paragraph was direct. "This correspondence serves as formal notice that you are the subject of an investigation under Section 42, 1983A, pertaining to potential civil rights violations against a federally protected minor." It wasn't just her job on the line anymore. It was her record, her legacy, possibly her freedom. Internal documents leaked soon after showed that FAA compliance officers had flagged Tina not only for the Gate 41 incident, but for a pattern. 2 prior complaints in the past 18 months involving condescending conduct toward grieving military families. Those had been quietly dismissed. Until now. Meanwhile, Elliot remained out of public view. A single photo surfaced from the day the act passed. He stood beside his father outside the Capitol, not in uniform, but in a dark suit and tie. No badge visible, just a boy looking out at a flag. He didn't pose, he didn't wave. He had nothing to prove. Inside a closed session at the Department of Transportation, the secretary addressed her staff. "We're not here because a boy got slapped. We're here because that boy reminded us what silence backed by integrity can do." The loudest lesson came from the quietest seat. The Justice Passenger Act would go into effect July 1st. But the impact, that had already arrived. Tina Morell's name was now etched, not in training manuals, but in legal history. Not as a caution, but as consequence. The boarding announcement came without ceremony. First class now boarding. Passengers requiring additional time may proceed to Gate 11. Elliot Grayson rose from the corner seat of the private lounge, badge tucked beneath his lapel, bag slung over his shoulder. No media presence, no entourage. Just a quiet, solitary walk through the jet bridge. He didn't look back. The flight crew stood straighter when he entered. One attendant gave a slight nod, too subtle for show, but Elliot noticed. He said nothing, simply moved to seat 1A, stowed his bag, and sat. Window seat, always the window seat. He adjusted the headphones over his ears, not to block out sound, but to define the boundary. A signal, not today, not now. The rest of first class boarded in near silence, conversations muted, no champagne clinks, just the occasional glance, curious, then reverent. They knew who he was, everyone did, but no one asked questions. Some stories are too loud to need retelling. As the plane pushed back, Elliot looked out across the tarmac. In the distance, he could just make out Gate 41, now with new signage, new staff, and a rotating message on its digital display. Passenger dignity standards enforced here. He blinked once, then turned away. A few rows back, a businessman in his 50s leaned slightly toward a new flight attendant. Young, fresh-eyed, still reading the cabin like a textbook. He nodded toward seat 1A and said quietly, "Don't touch the badge. Respect it." He didn't need noise to change the sky. The attendant froze for half a second, then straightened. Understood. The plane lifted. 30,000 feet above a country still arguing, still investigating, still rewriting policy. Elliot stared into the clouds. The turbulence didn't bother him. The soft chime of the seatbelt sign didn't distract him. His hands rested over the Justice Override badge. Now still, no longer glowing, but no less powerful. Behind him, someone whispered, "That's the boy who rewrote federal law." They weren't wrong, but that's not how Elliot would have told it. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wasn't out for revenge. He wasn't looking to teach a lesson. He was just protecting something sacred, dignity. And for all the systems that had failed, one thing remained. A boy who never shouted, never lashed out, never raised his voice, yet brought an entire industry to its knees. The captain's voice crackled through the cabin. "Smooth skies ahead, folks. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the quiet." Elliot closed his eyes, because he had earned it.